Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to Season 1 of the Pro American Late Model Series. Tonight is the penultimate round of the season, round number 11 out of 12, and I'll tell you what, race fans, what a season it has been. Right now, coming into this race, our top 5 drivers in the championship standings are all under a blanket. 3 of them could be our new championship leader after this race, and everyone in the top 5 has the potential to make it up into, for sure, the top 3, and maybe even just the top 2 if the perfect storm comes out. So it's going to be quite literally all coming down to these next 2 race nights for these drivers to figure out where exactly they will be finishing in the Season 1 championship. That said, we're already down to the starting line for our first heat race of the evening here at North Wilkesboro. And starting out on the pole tonight, that's going to be the 23 of Jonathan Emerson. To his outside, that's going to be the number 99 of Tyler McRae, a driver we have not been able to see much of this season. But even though he's only been running here part-time, he does have 2 wins to his name in that number 99 machine. Back in P number 3, that is Gerard Lawrence in the 27, who is our current championship points leader for the evening, followed by the 126 of John Friley, rounding out row number 2. 5th place going to go back to the 28 America's Navy entry of Jason Branch, with the 6 of Tommy Mitchell making up 6th place. 7th going to go back to the rookie driver, that's the 19 of TJ Moon, making his second start here with the series. And finally, rounding out this 8-car field, that's going to be the 07 of Wesley Whitfield. That said, it actually does not look like Wesley has made it out to the starting grid right now, so it will be a 7-car heat race here to determine the inside row of our main event here at the North Wilkesboro Speedway, a track with a whole lot of history to it, and a track that is bound to put on some exciting racing here tonight. Pace cars off, green flag up in the air, we are rolling just like that. 8 laps is the distance for this first heat race, and going to be side by side pretty much all throughout the field. Tommy Mitchell falling back a couple of spots, looked like he might have overdrove the corner a little bit and had to fall back. But everywhere else on the track, everyone now starting to single file out and see just where this track takes them. This is arguably one of the most unique tracks here on the iRacing.com platform. The track built back in the 1940s, and the crew that put this whole track together actually did not have the funds. In trouble for Tommy Mitchell getting very loose out of turn number 2, and for good reason. The team that put this track together did not have the budget to build what they had intended, so they built the track without actually flattening the RAN. So this oval here is actually built on an incline, it is built on the side of the hill. It's a little hard to tell from these angles that we are looking at. The drivers actually are going uphill down the backstretch and going downhill on their way down to the finish line. Side by side for P number 2, that's Emerson and Lawrence. Lawrence going to back off of it just a little bit as Emerson gets loose off the corner. Don't want to be making any incidental contact this early on into tonight's event. We haven't even made it to the main yet. And right now, going to be crossing the line and making it 3 laps to go, and this is your top 3 cars here. McRae, Emerson, Lawrence, 1, 2, and 3. McRae and TJ Moon all the way back in 6th, the only 2 drivers so far to have changed positions in this first heat race. McRae building up a pretty comfortable gap for the lead here as we get the 2 to go for this heat race. Emerson trying to push his car and catch back up, and both him and Lawrence both getting incredibly loose there. They both hold on to it, but both cars sideways going into turn 1. And coming through 3 and 4, they got it under control a little bit better. White flag up in the air. Do either of these drivers have anything under the hoods to be able to catch up to Tyler McRae? Coming through turn 2 and heading down the backstretch, it is looking like the verdict is going to be no, especially as Lawrence has an impact with the outside wall. He's going to set it in deep, but will it be enough? No, it will not. Tyler McRae going to be the winner of heat race number 1. That is going to be putting him on the very front row of our main event here this evening. But now, drivers making their way down for heat race number 2. This is going to be determining the outside row of tonight's event. Heading on down trackside, starting out on the front of this one. That's going to be driver that is currently P2 in the standings. That is the number 12 of Kenny Tripp. It is outside the 85 of Brandon Kiger. Look at that, it's the driver in 3rd place in the championship standings, rounding out the front row of this heat event. Making up row number 2, that is Will Salamone in the number 72 with the 9 of Joshua Dube rounding out the 2nd row. 45 of Mike Sukup and the 66 of Brent Mex will be making up row number 3, with row number 4 being made up of the 37 of Art Hendren and the 40 of Sean Patrick. A couple of drivers out there in this second heat race that we've actually not seen all that often out here in the series. Sean, I believe, has only made 3 starts so far this season, so definitely great to be seeing some of these drivers back out here on the track, and we will definitely have to see just what they are able to pull off in these final 2 races of the season, because even if they aren't battling for the championship, they are battling with other drivers to make their own names in the record book and to achieve all of their personal goals. Right now, Patrick currently in 21st in the championship standings, looking to break his way into the top 20. But we'll just have to see if he's able to pull that off. Pace car is off, green flag up in the air. We are rolling for heat race number 2 here tonight. In a little bit of trouble, Brent Mex slow into turn number 1. He's going to get a bump from behind by, I believe, that was the 40. That was actually Sean Patrick making a little bit of contact with Mex early on in this heat race. Just not the run into the corner he needed and not the run into the corner that Patrick was expecting. All cars still pointed the right direction though, which is always a good thing to see here in short track racing. A little bit of nudging is to be expected, and anything like that, not really a big deal at all. Currently side by side for a P number 2, that is Kiger and Dube duking it out. Dube down on the low line. Kiger gonna drift up high, and that's gonna allow Mr. Salamone to get his nose down in there. Now they're side by side for P number 3. Salamone sneaking on by, a little bit of contact. Door to door, they're coming out of 4. And they're still side by side, heading down the front stretch in contact. That's gonna send Kiger around. Kiger's now all the way back into last place, and that is going to bring out the caution for the first time here at the North Wilkesboro Speedway in heat race number 2. Let's see if we can't take a look back here and see just what happened to Brandon Kiger, see if we can't get a little bit of a better view of what all went down there. Looking down at the driver of that number 85, as well as the 72 of Will Salamone, heading down to turn number 1. Both drivers door to door, and they get stuck together just a little bit. Kiger tries to hold on to it, but he's just not able to keep the car pointed in the right direction. Just a little bit of too much of the little thing we like to call physics being exerted on his car. Take another look back at that. Not a whole lot that could have been done. Kiger came down a little bit, Salamone came up a little bit, and Kiger just got the short end of the stick. That said, does not look like there will be any sort of damage to that number 85. That said, he is pulling it down pit lane, so maybe he has a little bit more damage than we first thought. I didn't think that that was very bad damage on that number 85 late model, but sure enough, he's got it pulled on down to pit lane, and it doesn't look like he is going to be coming out on the track for the remainder of this heat race. So Brandon Kiger are going to be starting this race in last position, but that is not the end of the story for the driver of the 85. We do not have enough drivers registered for tonight's event to have any eliminations. So Kiger will still be making it to the main event. His car will be fully repaired for the main event. He's just going to be starting all the way back in the last position. So not the place that one of the drivers battling it out for this championship wants to be in, but it's not a place that's impossible to recover from. That said, lights are out on the iRacing.com pace car. We are going to be getting it green flag racing next time by. And it looks like the verdict, never mind, lights are back on. They did call off the restart here. Driver's not where race control wants them to be. We are stacking them up 2 by 2 now. And it looks like there might be a little bit of confusion on where cars are supposed to be right now. Lights off on the pace car again. So far, it looks like we are good to be going green this time by. No word from race control quite yet that anything is incorrect, and we do have it lined up 2 by 2, so it does look like we are going to be good to go this time by. Kenny Tripp, Joshua Doob, teammates the front row of this second heat event, followed by Mike Sukup, Will Salamone, rounding out that second row. Pace cars off, green flag back up in the air, and a very good start by Kenny Tripp. With 4 laps to go in this heat race and a little bit of contact there. Aaron pointed in the right direction, but a little bit of bumper being used. These drivers, almost all of them, at least in the top 4 or 5, are still, theoretically at least, in contention for the championship of the season, and they are not afraid to start making each other work for their positions. Another hard impact there. I believe that might have been an engine exploding. That might have actually been Brandon Kiger down on pit lane, his engine expiring. Not quite sure. Either way, 2 laps to go, and Kenny Tripp built himself up a fairly considerable lead. Then it is Doob and Sukup for second and third, and side by side back in the back. This is the battle for the 6th position. This is between Sean Patrick and Brent Mex. Mex up on the high line, trying to see if he can't get around that Dropping Bombs Racing entry, but as the white flag comes up in the air, Patrick is going to clear him, and coming around the speedway, it looks like Kenny Tripp is going to be taking home the second heat race of the evening here tonight, followed by Joshua Doob, Mike Sukup, Will Salamone, Art Hendry, and Sean Patrick, Brent Mex. And naturally, gotta hit a sick drift through the corner just to style on us a little bit. That said, these drivers getting just a little bit of extra time to get their cars warmed up, to get the last couple of things squared away, and potentially even take a potty break. So we will be back in just a moment, race fans. Don't go anywhere, and we will be going green flag racing with our main event here at the North Wilkesboro Speedway. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back. Drivers making their way down to the speedway for our 150 lap main event here tonight at the North Wilkesboro Speedway. 150 laps for round number 11 out of this 12-week season. Let's see how these drivers are going to be rolling off here tonight. Starting out up in the front, that's the 99 of Tyler McRae, with Kenny Tripp rolling off in P number 2. Third place going to go back to that 23 of Jonathan Emerson, with his teammate of Joshua Doob in the 9 starting his outside. Speaking of, it does look like Joshua Doob got lucky and rolled the die. Joshua Doob is going to be the driver designated to have the winning starting position. So if Joshua Doob in 4th place right now manages to take home the win here tonight, he will be winning $20. That said, 5th place going to go back to championship leader Gerard Lawrence in the 27, with Mike Sukup in the 45 starting to his outside for row number 3. 7th place going to go back to the 126 of John Friley and Will Salamone for row number 4. 9th going to go back to the 28 of Jason Branch, with the 37 of Art Hendren starting P number 10. 11th going to go back to TJ Moon, with the 40 of Sean Patrick starting 12th. 13th going to go to Tommy Mitchell, then Brent Mex, Wesley Whitfield, and Brandon Kiger all the way back at the back of the field to round out your 15-car field here tonight. Green flag up in the air. We are going racing at North Wilkesboro. 150 laps is the distance. And I'll tell you what, race fans, these drivers are not going to be playing nice here tonight. Everything comes down to these next 2 races. Everything comes down to, call it about, I want to say 400 laps between tonight's event and next week's event. And side by side on the lead between McRae and Tripp, these 2 drivers are already racing on lap number 2 like it is lap number 145. These 2 door to door. They managed to get separated, but pretty much completely touching each other through the entirety of turns 3 and 4, and already we have a little bit of a trouble as Tommy Mitchell is around. Sean Patrick potentially also involved. First caution of the evening going to come out for the driver of the Little Caesars entry. That's going to be Tommy Mitchell rolling it on down to pit lane. Let's take a look back here and see just what happened to bring out this first caution of the evening. It looks like Art Hendren's also going to be coming down pit lane. Art Hendren might have also been involved there. Let's take a look back and see if our camera crews don't know what happened to the 6 of Tommy Mitchell. He's already a little bit slow going into turns 3 and 4, and he just gets loose, slams on the brakes, tries his best to stop it, counter steers, and into the outside wall. And no other cars were collected there, so it looks like Sean Patrick might have had his own separate incident there. Let's rewind this a little bit further. This is, I believe, the lap prior, going down into turns 1 and 2. Tommy Mitchell getting a bit loose in that 6. He ends up in the grass, but locks it down, keeps it rolling. Gets back up on the speedway. That would be why we saw him being slow going into turns 3 and 4. Gets it going again. And immediately loses it in. So something under the hood of that number 6 Little Caesars entry not handling the way he wants it to. But that raises the question, what happened to Sean Patrick? Because Sean Patrick was pretty much not visible anywhere in that whole incident. So let's see if we can't take a look back and see what happened to that number 40. This is heading down the backstretch side by side with Art Hendren. Art Hendren gets into the wall in a hard impact that really Sean had nothing he could really do to avoid there. Let's give one more look at this before we bring it back live. Art Hendren, that 37, just a hard impact into the wall, ricochets off of it, and sends Patrick down into the inside wall. So a bit of an unfortunate circumstance all around. That's 3 cars down on pit lane: Art Hendren, Sean Patrick, and Tommy Mitchell. And it does look like Patrick's rolling back out onto the speedway, albeit with a very heavily damaged number 40. Lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car, though. We are going to be going green flag racing yet again, this time by Tyler McRae, Kenny Tripp, still the front row of tonight's event. Then it's going to be Emerson and Doob in row number 2. Sukup, and Lawrence in row number 3. And I'll tell you what, these first 3 rows are a who's who of drivers contending for the championship of Palm Season 1. Green flag up in the air. We are rolling yet again. Looks like everything is good around the speedway. No trouble on that initial restart. That said, Tripp going up high just a little bit. And a little bit of contact there again between Tripp and McRae. Side by side into turn 3 and 4. They're not going to lock doors again like they did that initial time. And behind them, battling out as well, that is the 9 of Joshua Doob and McRae's teammate of Mr. Mike Sukup there in the Dropping Bombs race and entry. Sukup going to fall back just a little bit to try and see if he can't line up something to get around these 2 Halo trailer entries and catch back up to his teammate. 2 teams battling it out for the top 5 though. Tripp, Emerson, and Doob all teammates, and McRae and Sukup also both teammates. So might have to see if a little bit of team orders potentially comes into play throughout these top 5s. Ironically enough, out of all the drivers in the top 5 of this race, Tyler McRae, who was initially leading this race, is actually all the way back in the 14th position in the championship standings, despite the fact he has 2 wins to his name already. Just a matter of not being able to compete the full season like some of these other drivers have. But when he is here, that number 99 has a whole lot of speed under its belt. 12 laps in the books. Now that everyone's got it rolling, doesn't look like we're at too much risk of a yellow coming back out. Everyone is currently running it single file. Taking a little bit further back, look in the back of the field. Currently the most improved driver, that's going to be the number 85 of Brandon Kiger, up 5 positions already from where he qualified. Of course, Kiger did start up in the front row of his heat race, then had that unfortunate wreck that sent him all the way back to the back of the field. Now he's out here doing a little bit of work to try and make himself do the last to first challenge. Whether or not he'll be able to do it remains to be seen, but there's a long race ahead of us, and Art Hendren is back on pit lane. This is Hendren's 2nd time down onto pit lane in that number 37. Not quite sure if it's having handling issues under the hood or what's going on, but Hendren shouldn't be wanting to take that car down pit lane for a first time, much less a 2nd time in just 16 laps. Right now, everyone fairly spread out around the speedway. Single file all the way around. Patience is going to be a key factor for all of these drivers. I know that a lot of these drivers have had a long, grueling week coming and waiting for tonight's event, practicing and getting ready for whatever this speedway could throw at them. McRae heading down to the low line to try and get around Tripp. His patience may have run just a little bit thin, and now he's trying to put himself into the lead of this race. Loose into turn number 1 though. He manages to get the car to stick, but it's not going to be enough to make the pass. Tripp is going to clear that 99 of McRae and immediately come back down to block. We did get an update on the point standings for you though. Currently, after everything is said and done with our heat races, Gerard Lawrence is still in the lead of the championship. He is back in the 6th position right now, but after our heat races have concluded, he is still in the lead just by a small handful of points. Kenny Tripp back in P number 2. Then Brandon Kiger, and a little bit of contact as Emerson and Doob get into each other. These are 2 teammates nearly pushing it 3 wide. Almost all 3 of the Hale trailer drivers pushing it 3 wide for a second there. And that's going to be trouble. That's McRae slamming hard on the brakes to keep from getting on the inside wall, and Doob and Emerson make contact again. But somehow, that whole mess just actually worked out for these three drivers, because now these three drivers, all teammates, are making up position 1, 2, and 3 of tonight's event. Now it remains to be seen, will they all cooperate to bring home the entire race podium for their racing team, or are they going to still battle it out like their rivals for this championship? It also brings McRae and Suka back together as well. These two going to be doing what they can to try and work together to get up into the lead of this race. McRae always looking for another win, but his teammate of Suka is in the 5th position in the championship standings, and I would not be surprised if he's going to do at least a little bit to try and get that 45 in a position to try and contend for the championship next week at the Five Flags Speedway. I said, as they come out of turn number 4, Suka way high through the corner. That's going to allow McRae not quite to clear him, but he is setting up an overtake on that number 45. Just behind the two of them, though, that's Gerard Lawrence. Lawrence working to try and get up in the lead of this race. He has 4 wins to his name so far. Looking to make it win number 5 here tonight in that number 7. That would be quite the feat, and if he somehow managed to bring home tonight's race and next week's race at Five Flags Speedway, that means he would be able to basically win the entire half of the season. And with the incredible amount of competition that these drivers have been putting on, that would be an insanely impressive feat by the driver of the number 27. Of course, no reason to be getting too far ahead of ourselves. That is just a what if, and if these races have shown us anything, a whole lot can go wrong for these drivers in these next 130 laps. A little bit further back, Jason Branch looking to try and get around John Friley in that 19, and TJ Moon's also looking to maybe try and make the pass as well. Friley stuck up on the high side, not a whole lot he can do to defend against Branch, but he is going to immediately cut down low, and that's going to keep Moon from being able to make the overtake. And just behind them, that's Brandon Kiger in the 85. Kiger's still looking to try and make up some more spots. He's up in 11th right now, started back in 15th. So he is making up ground in that 85, but will it be enough to get him back up in the front of this race? A little bit further up the field, Salamone in a little bit of a bubble, but not quite one. He's currently back in the 7th position. Just in front of him, Lawrence in the 27. Getting around him, not going to be an easy task, but we've seen Salamone competing up here in the top 5 of these races pretty often. He hasn't been able to construct the perfect race and take home a win quite yet, but he has been putting together some very good runs. Currently, Salamone being scored back into the 7th position, just about 9 points behind Thomas Mitchell, who is currently being scored 28 laps down. So this could be the race that Salamone needs to get himself up into the 6th position. And then it's just going to be a matter of looking into the top 5 of this championship. 33 laps in the books, though. Still a decently long time left in tonight's event for really anything to happen to these drivers. Brandon Kiger trying to get around that number 19 TJ Moon. It looks like Moon having a little bit of connection issues, which is always a scary sight for these drivers to see, because that little bit of flickering you see happening on the broadcast, that is happening down on the racetrack for all of these drivers too. That said, Kiger going to pull it down low, side by side with the 19, and he is going to be just nosing ahead of him. Moon's going to lift off. Kiger going to be getting another position to his name. He has now broke his way into the top 10 in just 36 laps. Still 100 and roughly 115 for this number 85 to potentially get himself up into the top 5 of this race. but it's not going to be easy for him. Riley, Branch, Salomon, Lawrence, all drivers that are going to give him a whole lot of work. That's it. Moon and Max aren't out of this. Moon is still keeping pace with that 85 machine, and last time by actually set a faster lap time than Kiger, so it looks like Moon really pushing to catch back up and break his way back up into the top 10. Moon currently the only driver in the field to currently be in the position where he qualified right now in that number 19. Being scored back into the 11th position. So the drivers further up the field having scrapes against the walls. You can hear a little bit of impacts going on. Tyler McRae back down into the 4th position, and 1, 2, and 3. That's Tripp, Emerson, and Doob, all managing to put together the race that they were all probably starting to hope for. Question is, will it last for them? We have seen, especially later on in the run, is where this team seems to run into a little bit of difficulty. Last week, there was some issues with fuel mileage. Some of these drivers did not plan out the fuel strategy the way they had hoped it to and ended up running out of fuel on the last couple laps. That ended up with Brandon Kiger taking home the win. And of course, Brandon Kiger being scored back into the 10th position right now. So that just goes to show really anything is possible for these drivers, both good or bad. Drivers still battling back in the back of this field just as much as they are battling up in the front. Mex looking to try and get around TJ Moon. Both drivers a little bit loose coming out of turn number 4, but Moon still has the advantage in this battle. Mex pushing to really try and catch up to him. They're going to cross over each other and setting it down into turn number 3. Mex is backing off just a little bit. He might have just saw that whole crossover move happening in 1 and 2 and decided that maybe doing it again is not the safest idea that they've ever had. Currently, these two drivers battling for the 11th position. Both of them have fallen back a pretty decent bit from Brandon Kiger as Moon scrapes the outside wall there. Not the first time at any of these tracks that we have seen drivers scrape the outside wall, and certainly not going to be the last. Mex, having to get hard on the brakes there, was trying to make a move on the high side and didn't expect Moon to also be up there. And another scrape against the outside wall for Moon. And you're starting to see the damage accumulate on the side of that 19 just a little bit. And if he continues to do that, that is going to start to hurt his overall top speed. And he does it again, another scrape against the outside wall. And I thought potentially trouble there, but it does look like this was intentional. Both the Dropping Bombs Racing drivers that were in the top 5 have brought it on down to pit lane. Sean Patrick still out there on the speedway in that damage number 40. Sean Patrick also competing for Dropping Bombs. And he's got a whole lot to worry about because those are the 3 race leaders hot on his tail right now. A little bit of a scary combination, a damaged car being lapped and 3 incredibly fast, incredibly competitive cars in the top 3 duking it out. But it does look like they are going to make the pass without much issue. Sean Patrick going to pull it up high, let them all on by. He is currently the first car being scored a lap down in that number 40 machine. But McRae and Sukup coming down pit lane. McRae looks like he might be having a bit of trouble. Sukup's already back out on the track. Sukup got back out on the track almost a full 45 seconds ago. Now McRae's coming back out on that number 99, but he's scored 3 laps down now, so he had something go wrong on pit lane. Whether it was a stop and go or a stop and hold or some sort of penalty, or if his crew just had a miscommunication with him, that is going to be a massive impact on the number 99. That could potentially be the end of his story here tonight, depending on how this race plays out. Tommy Mitchell up in the wall just a bit in that number 6. He's pulling it up high to let the race leaders go on by. That's Art Hendon going down below him, and then next up going to be Brandon Kiger going down beneath him. Mike Sukup starting to pass his way around cars, though. He just passed Sean Patrick for position. Now Sukup is the first car a lap down. Only him and McRae have come down pit lane under this green flag. So that is technically the very beginning of tonight's pit cycle, but it seems like both of them may have been trying to short pit just a little bit. Now the other drivers on the speedway seem to be too imminently concerned about making their pit stops. Just behind them, Jason Branch and John Friley battling for position. Friley back in the 7th position. Branch back in, or up in 6th. This is a close to a battle on the championship standings. Currently, Branch being scored back into 11th with John being scored up in 9th. So only 2 positions separating these 2 cars in the championship battle. It is going to take a pretty considerable margin in points between these 2 drivers to actually allow them to pass each other on the championship's roster, but passing each other on the speedway, every single position counts, and it adds up. And especially in these last 2 races, these 2 drivers really need to be doing everything they can and getting every single position that they can grab a hold of so that they have themselves at least in the best possible position to head into the championship event next week. A little bit further back, Brandon Kiger has introduced himself into this battle. He is looking to try and break his way into the top 5, and John Friley is the next target he needs to pass in order to do that. But he's got himself up in 7th now, so he is up 9 positions in 58 laps, and as he peeks down to the low side looking to try and make that 10, John Friley pulling it up way up high, side by side down the front stretch. And Friley is still being scored as the leader as they cross the line of this battle, but he is going to fall back behind Kiger pretty quickly. That's going to make Kiger up 10 positions in 60 laps. And speaking of lap 60, looks like more drivers starting to come down pit lanes. This is Kenny Tripp and Jonathan Emerson making their respective stops here tonight, and a little bit of contact between the 2 of them. This is the 1987 scan of North Wilkesboro Speedway. So this is the track how it was back in the 1980s, and back then maybe safety standards were a little bit different than they were here today, hence this pit lane being so tiny and having basically no entry lane and no exit lane. A little bit unsafe for these drivers, but that's why they're on iRacing and not in real life. Believe it or not, you can't risk dying if you wreck your car in a simulator. That said, Doob coming back out onto the track, and just like that, you saw it, there's no pit exit lane here. It's just a matter of hoping there aren't cars that are on the preferred racing line when you come out of pit lane. Lawrence coming down pit lane, as well as Salamone. Salamone, for a very brief moment, was the leader of the race, but not anymore. He's going to be coming down pit lane, up 4 positions from where he started. And now Brandon Kiger is in the lead of this race, even if it is temporary and will only be there until the pit cycle goes through. For a very, very brief moment, Brandon Kiger will be leading this race from starting all the way back in last. As I said, he is going to try and get around that 9 of Joshua Doob. Doob currently not yet a lapped car, but he will be if he gets past here. A couple of drivers still need to come down pit lane. Kiger, Tandy both need to come down, and potentially trouble. That's Tommy Mitchell down on the infield grass in that number 6, and he's taken the tow. Tommy Mitchell taking the tow to his pit stop instead of just pulling it straight down, so there might be a little damage or something wrong under the hood for that number 6. We can take a quick look back and see what happened to him real quick. And it looks like it's the telltale old-time fable of just getting your tires in the grass on pit entry and spinning around. But now more drivers down on pit lane. John Friley down. Brandon Kiger down. Friley's actually on his way back out of the speedway. And right now, Mike Sukup is being scored as our race leader. And Mike Sukup has completed his pit stop. So as the cycle goes through, it does look like Sukup is actually our new race leader. 67 laps in the books. Gonna be starting lap number 68 as we cross the line. And now Sukup is going to be our race leader, sure enough. Up 5 positions from where he qualified in that number 45, and after the heat and qualifying, Sukup is only 8 points shy of Joshua Dube. Mind you, here in this league, if you get a perfect storm of getting a race win and getting a heat win, that would be putting you at roughly 120 points gained. So only 8 points separating Sukup and Dube. That is a matter of only probably 2 or 3 finishing positions on the speedway. So if things finished right now how they were, looking at the time of scoring, Dube is back in the 4th position. Sukup might actually just pass him for 4th in the championship. So this could have some implications depending on how this race plays out if Sukup were to bring home a win tonight. We've seen him get pretty close a couple of times throughout this season, but just a little bit of bad luck has generally tended to come his way, and it's come incredibly close to a win, but has not quite managed to bring one home quite yet. So tonight, round 11 of the season could be where he makes it happen. Right now he has a 2.3 second lead. That said, it is closing just a bit, but either way, the 45 car is in the lead of this race. Further back, this is the battle for the 2nd position. This is teammates Tripp and Emerson duking it out. Tripp currently 2nd in the championship standings. Emerson back in 12th. For these two teammates, still been known to battle it out when they have the opportunity to. Ultimately, they are all here to win one way or another. Even if they do compete together under the same flag and they do practice together and compare notes just a little bit, when it comes race time, they are out here to get a win. Further back in the field, this is the battle for 6th. This is Salomon and Jason Branch, both drivers up a couple of positions from where they qualified. Branch looking to try and get his way into the top 10 of the points championship here tonight in that number 28. Salomon, however, is in 7th. So both these drivers outside of the top 5 here tonight, but they all have their own stories to tell. They all have their own battles and their own goals in order to try and complete the season how they are hoping to. TJ Moon back out on the speedway as well. Currently the last car on the lead lap in that number 19. He is being scored back into the 26th position of tonight's event. After all, this is, I believe, his 3rd start here with the league. He has 100 points to his name. And right in front of him, there's Steven Rex, who was unable to attend tonight. And then there's that 24, or the 07, excuse me. That's Wesley Whitfield just in front of him in the championship standing. So if TJ manages to finish this event in a high enough position, he will actually be getting around Whitfield, just because Whitfield did not actually start the race. He did register, he did turn a few practice laps, but he did not start the race. So that is potential for that number 19 car to make a couple positions in the standings. Speaking of championship implications, though, Art Hendren has retired from the race in that number 37. He is the first driver to have officially called it quits here tonight. Art is 8th in the championship, so John Friley just behind him in the number 126, so that could be a position for Friley after tonight's event. All around the speedway, everyone just trying to see what they can do to accumulate any points that they can and put themselves in a good position heading into the Five Flags Speedway, because at Five Flags next week, that is a 250 lap race. That will be the longest race of the entire season for any of these drivers, and dare I say it might be a little bit of an endurance challenge for some of them. 250 laps, not as long as official endurance racing out there, of course, but either way, that is going to come down to roughly an hour and a half or so of green flag racing. That's going to be a lot of work for these drivers, especially at a short track like that. So the question is going to remain, who is not the fastest car, but which driver has the most perseverance to get through a 250 lap event? A little bit further up in the field, looking down at Brandon Kiger, who is back in the 6th position after everything has cycled through with the pit stops. So Kiger, he has now made it up 10 positions from where he qualified in just 85 laps, and he is still climbing. Brandon Kiger is on the outside looking in to a top 5 finish here tonight. Of course, not going to come easily. He has to make up an entire 3.5 seconds to catch up to Gerard Lawrence. But if a yellow were to come out, that would be a pretty easy task for him. Mike Sukup getting caught up to by Kenny Tripp. Tripp has closed the distance, and Tripp is looking to try and make a pass side by side coming out of turn 4. Sukup is going to get the run off the corner, but Tripp is there. Tripp is not going to make it easy for him, and being down on the lower line is generally where you want to be at this speedway. So Sukup is now in a very uncomfortable situation, especially now because Emerson's got his nose in there too, and Emerson's looking to try and exploit this opportunity that was provided to him by his teammate. Not going to be able to. Sukup's going to close the door and cement himself, at least for the time being, back in P number 2. That said, Emerson going to immediately dive it down low, and Sukup's going to go up high and let him go by. Look at the lap times. Sukup might be having a little bit of tire fall off here tonight. He's still battling it out here, so it's not like he just gave up the position all willy-nilly. But especially as this battle goes on for longer, that is not going to be doing his tires any favor. You know, North Wilkesboro is arguably one of the more forgiving tracks that we've been to this season when it comes to tire management, so it's not going to be a massive deal. But the late model in general is a car that is just kind of sensitive to how you treat your tires, and that is something I fully expect to see come into the play as we get into the longer run of this race. We are past the halfway point, so we are in the closing chapters of tonight's events, but we still have 59 laps to go. Plenty of time for drivers to be making another pit stop and reevaluating their strategies, and maybe even shaking things up a little bit and going with plan Bs. That said, Tripp and Emerson have caught up to lap traffic. The first car they're going to have to get around, that is TJ Moon in the number 19. And it does look like Moon going to pull it up high. Actually, no, their first car they got to get around is the 99 of Tyler McRae, and then they got to get around TJ Moon. And it looks like McRae actually has a little bit of right front damage. I'm not entirely sure how that happened to the 99. But yeah, you can see him getting loose through the corner there. So it does look like McRae might have had a little bit of an incident somewhere. And very nearly contact there, and that is contact. That is McRae and Tripp getting together. Both drivers holding onto it, but McRae is going to be falling back another lap and getting just a little bit more damage on the side of that number 99. Mind you, McRae was a driver that was battling for the lead of this race and was the race leader at one point. He actually qualified on the front row of this race, and currently he's being scored 2 laps down after he had some sort of difficulty down on pit lane that kept him down there for way longer than he should have been. Either way, he is still battling it out. He is still trying his best to stay in the contention of this race. Of course, if cautions were to come out, there is potential for him to get back on the lead lap, as there is 3 lucky dogs here in the Pro American Late Model Series instead of just 1. But even then, he would need at least 3 cautions to make it work. And as he scraped the outside wall up there, it seems like potentially he almost made it happen. Side by side here for position number 3. This is Doob and Sukup battling it out with 2 lapped cars just in front of them. Sukup up on the high line again. It's not the place he wants to be, but it seems to be the place he continues to find himself. And side by side, that's McRae battling it out with the number 19 of TJ Moon. These 2 drivers are not battling for position right now. But either way, they certainly are both driving like they are in contention for the lead of this race. That said, McRae is going to clear Moon. Again, not for position. Moon is still in front of Tyler McRae in the actual standings right now. But I'll tell you what, these drivers are getting feisty. They are not amused by these lap cars having the audacity to exist on the speedway, and they're all using a little bit of bumper to try and get their way around them. For the most part here, it is lap cars on the high side, lead lap cars down on the low side. But still, that no one is yielding. Everyone is pushing their cars to the best of their ability to just try and get any sort of setup ready for the remainder of this race as we make our way back down for pit cycle number 2. Sukup down, Gerard Lawrence down, Will Salamone down. First 3 drivers are going to be coming down for pit cycle number 2. That's going to have Tripp still in control of this race, then Emerson, then Doob. Now a bit spread out, and Tyler McRae coming down as well. McRae looking to see if he can't recover some positions from that first initial pit stop by coming down as early as he can this second time around. The question is, will McRae actually have the pit stop he needs here tonight? He will be taking tires, but hopefully, sure enough, he's coming back down. An 11-second pit time for Tyler McRae as compared to the roughly minute and 5-second pit time he had back on that first pit stop. So McRae's got it down this time, but will it be enough to get him back into the lead lap of this race? Kenny Tripp still in the lead, Emerson back in P number 2. Just a matter of seeing what these 3 drivers have up their sleeves for their pit strategy. Joshua Doob coming down. He's going to be the first of these 3 teammates to come down. Then Brandon Kiger coming down as well. Kiger was being scored up in the 4th position as he made his pit stop, so Kiger has gained even more ground here tonight. And now Tripp and Emerson coming down as well as TJ Moon. TJ Moon also down on pit lane. So now it looks like everyone, for the most part, having a good idea of what they're going to be doing. For most of these drivers, this should be the final pit stop of the evening. 43 laps left to go. Brent Mex being scored as the leader of tonight's race right now in that number 66 machine. Just behind him, Jason Branch being scored P number 2 in that number 28 America's Navy entry, the driver out of Virginia Beach, being scored up on the podium as we go through this pit cycle. Branch originally qualified back in 9th, back in 8th, so he is having a pretty good run here this evening. He's finished back in the top 5 last week at New Smyrna. So he is a driver that we have seen be in contention, at least in the top 5, a couple of times throughout this season. Currently looking back at P number 6 though, this is Sukup and Doob. Both drivers have pitted already, that 9 in that 45, so now these two battling it out for that position on the speedway. And it looks like just behind them Tyler McRae is there as well, but McRae again not on the lead lap here tonight. Neither is that 40 Sean Patrick there, also for dropping bombs racing, also not being scored on the lead lap right now. Currently the last driver not on the lead lap, that is the 85 of Brandon Kiger, and surely he is going to be put back on the lead lap once the pit cycle is complete. Currently having a bit of battle with the 19 of TJ Moon. Now again, these two are not on the same lap, so they are not currently battling for position right now. But that's not going to stop them from driving their hearts out and really just throwing everything they have at each other, because ultimately, it's like I said, the championship is next week, so really you have to give your 110% for this race no matter what. Jason Branch now coming down pit lane as well. So it looks like the only drivers that still really need to come down, Brent Mex, John Friley, and that's actually it. Just Mex and Friley are the last two cars that need to come down to pit lane and do their pit stops. So that should put Kenny Tripp in the lead of this race once it's all sorted through. Currently the closest battle on the speedway right now is between Sukup and Emerson, and that's still half a second between these two. Tyler McRae pulling it up high in that number 99 machine. Still pushing the car pretty hard, but I think he's come to realize now his best bet is to maybe lay off a little bit and hope for a caution and make sure he still has a fast car underneath him should he get put back up on the lead lap. Because right now, battling it out with that 23 of Emerson, that is not getting him anywhere. That will not gain him any extra points. That will not move him up on the timing and scoring sheet right now. So for the time being, pushing the car might not be the best play. At the same time, there's only a little over 30 laps left, so at the same time you gotta wonder what else are you going to do if you're not gonna push. But you see McRae, he's getting loose through these corners, so a little bit of handling issues under the hood of that number 99, and that is only going to get further accentuated as we get later into this race. That said, the gap has closed between Sukup and Emerson. Emerson looking to try and get himself into the top 5, and all he has to do is get around that number 45 to make it happen. Sukup still running a higher line around the speedway, which is really interesting to see because for the most part, it seems like the low line has been what's working out for all of these drivers. A little bit loose off the corner there for Sukup, but he still is technically in the lead of this battle as they head down into turns 3 and 4. He falls back just a bit in mid-corner. He's going to try the crossover. He's going to go down to the low line now. And again, side by side, but he's not going to have enough. Emerson is going to close the door, and that is going to be that for that little battle. And now Emerson, currently the last driver in the top 5 of this race. 122 laps in the books, 150 the race distance. That's going to be leaving us with only about 27 once Mex comes back around the line. And speaking of Mex, Mex is still in the lead of this race. Mex has still not come down to pit lane. He really is just making a point of using every last drop of fuel he has in that number 66 late model. This time by, though, he is going to come down, and that is going to make Kenny Tripp our race leader once again. Will we be seeing John Friley come down? No, Friley stays out. Friley now the final car on the speedway that has not come down for his second pit stop in that number 126 entry. Now, even if he has been in full fuel save mode for these past 124 laps, I don't think Friley is going to have enough fuel to make it to the end of tonight's race. But at the same time, we have seen stranger things happen, so I would imagine right now Friley's game plan is to hope for a caution and hope he can come down pit lane and refuel that car without risk of going a lap down. And if a yellow does come out, then it will be an incredibly fortunate play by him, because he can get new tires put on that 126 and he can have a whole lot of short run speed on the initial restart. 25 laps to go here. If there were a time for drivers to start throwing punches, it would be now. Riley going to get passed by Joshua Dube. Dube up into P number 2. 2.6 seconds behind our race leader, so he has a bit of work to do if he wants to catch up to Kenny Tripp. Tripp kind of on his own right now. He's just kind of having a Sunday cruise over there in that number 12. As long as he can keep this car rolling around the speedway for 23 more laps without any sort of impediment, he is absolutely good to go to take home his third checkered flag. And currently Lawrence scored back in the 6th position, so that could potentially be enough to bump him up into the championship lead. It would be really close, so I don't want to make a definite call on that, but right now things are looking good for the driver of that number 12. John Friley finally coming down pit lane though. He has made his stop, and with that, the final pit cycle of tonight's event has been completed. Now it all comes down to who can persevere these last 21 laps. Make it 20 now as Tripp crosses the line. Right now, all that 12 is thinking is, I hope that a caution does not come out. Because as long as all these cars stay up to speed, it does look like Tripp is fairly consistently setting faster lap times than the rest of the field. But if we get all stacked up again, that might not save him in the short run. Looking further back, currently the closest battle on the speedway is between Salamone and Kiger. Kiger back in the 7th position, so no longer up 10 spots from where he qualified. He has fallen back just a little bit in that 85, but he still is having a really solid race put together. He started all the way back in 16th up to 7th. All in all, that is quite the improvement, and of course by far he is tonight's biggest mover. Second to him though is Brent Mex back in the 8th position, who is up 6 from where he started. So Mex also having a really solid run here this evening. Mex, however, kind of in a little bit of a bubble in that number 66. A 6-second gap to the car in front of him, a 8-second gap to the car behind him. There's not a whole lot of places he can go aside from just continuing to run his race and either wait for a yellow to come out or wait for the checkered flag to fly. But he is one of the biggest movers here tonight in that number 66 machine. Still, the two closest battles on the speedway, that is Salamone and Kiger in 2nd and 7th place respectively. 15 laps left to go, and it looks like Kiger is starting to gain. Kiger maybe not able to get a top 5 here this evening in that 85, but he certainly could try to line up a top 6, and he's going to do it just like that. Salomon going to pull it up high and just let him on by. 14 laps to go now is the distance, and now Kiger has his eyes set on Gerard Lawrence, and he's actually in a place where that might not be all that impossible to achieve. Right on board with him here, and you can see Gerard Lawrence is right there just in front of him, and he is starting to close the gap on that number 27 machine. Not by a whole lot, but he is slowly but surely whittling his way down to that 27 machine. That said, not a lot of time left in this race. We are getting incredibly close to reaching the double high five. And Brent Mex just came on down pit lane. Mex is down on pit lane for the third time here tonight in that number 66. So it looks like he might be having a bit of trouble under the hood of that 66. That's going to move him down the lap just like that. Maybe not as much fuel in that 66 as he had originally intended to put in. But Kiger is closing the gap on Lawrence pretty dang quickly with the double high fives up in the air. 10 laps to go, and Kiger is looking to potentially put himself in position for a top 5. Sure enough, he pulls it on down low. He's going to pull it up alongside Lawrence. Lawrence going to give him plenty of room in that 27, and just like that, Kiger is now in the top 5 of tonight's event from all the way back in last place. 8 laps to go here, and currently these 3 cars are the closest battles on the speedway for tonight's event. Kiger, Lawrence, Salamone all under a blanket, and these are actually the last 3 cars on the lead lap. Everyone behind them is being scored a lap down currently. Tripp still a comfortable lead to tonight's event. Dube and Emerson also both pretty spread out, and that would bring it home as a 1-2-3 for their racing team if they just manage to put together these last 7 laps and not have anything go wrong. And as long as everything goes smoothly and everyone plays nice with one another, that could be exactly what happens. 6 to go, make it 5 to go now as Tripp crosses the line, and a hard strafe against the outside wall for Salamone. That's going to cost him a little bit of time in that 72. But he's still in contention for this battle. He is still looking to try and catch up to Lawrence. Sending it down real low through 1 and 2. A little bit loose off the corner, but still gaining ground on Lawrence, but then he's losing it on corner entry. So maybe slightly different braking points for these 2 drivers. 4 laps to go now. Currently these 2, the closest battle on the speedway for position number 6. 3 laps to go. Not a whole lot of time left for these 2 to decide it. And Kenny Tripp cruising on by without a single care in the world. That's Joshua Dube behind him, a whole 3 seconds back. So these 3 drivers, really not that much of a worry in the world. Mike Sukup's there in that number 45, but I don't think he's close enough to make a pass in these next 2 laps. White flag up in the air. Kenny Tripp is your race leader. And these 2 are actually battling out for position back for 8th and 9th. That's John Friley and Jason Branch. Branch going to make the pass pretty handily. Branch is going to let off. Checkered flag up in the air. Kenny Tripp going to bring it on home in P number 1. Tripp is going to take home his 3rd checkered flag of the season. And he is going to absolutely drift it through turns 1 and 2 here tonight. And then drifted again in 3 just for good measure. So now as these drivers bring it on down to victory lane, Kenny Tripp going to be burning it down for his 3rd win with the Pro American Late Model Series here this season. quite the celebration by that number 12. He was P number 2 coming into tonight's event. And with Gerard Lawrence finishing all the way back outside of the top 5, this really could be the turning point for the Season 1 championship. This could be what it took to put Kenny Tripp on top of the standings heading into next week's event. Of course, again, I'm not 100% certain on that math, but if it didn't put Tripp in the lead of the championship, then he is pretty much one or two speedway positions behind him. That said, don't go anywhere, race fans. We will be back in just a second with interviews with your top 3 finishers. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to the North Wilkesboro Speedway. Coming to the conclusion of round number 11 of Season 1 of the Pro American Late Model Series. And welcome back as well to Mr. Kenny Tripp, taking home your 3rd checkered flag of the season. How are you feeling now that you've got another win under your belt and have narrowed the championship gap even further?
I'm feeling really good. Really good race. Won the first 2 races of the season, and then just haven't been able to close the deal since. But I had a good feeling about this race. This was definitely a race on my calendar that I wanted to compete well and win, and I achieved that, and the whole team did. So definitely close the gap. I don't have a clue how much. I know I don't even know where he finished in his heat race, but every point matters, and just going into next week and gotta put it all out there. Got no choice.
Yes, sir. I do have the unofficial points here. Unofficially, Gerard is still in the lead, and you are 11 points behind him right now. So 11 points, that's a matter of 1 or 2 finishing positions, pretty much. Do you think heading into the Five Flags Speedway next week, is that a track where you think you can make it happen?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I'm pretty good at that track. But just stuff doesn't fall my way. I just gonna roll with it, and he's pretty much my only competition in that race. I don't think that Tiger can catch me. I don't think maybe he can. I don't really know about that either. But if I get too caught up in points, I screw myself. So just gonna go out there and just worry about beating the 27.
That does sound like a pretty good plan. I won't bog you down with any more points. A clear conscience is definitely a good way to be going into what is bound to be a pretty stressful race. But for tonight, you get to celebrate another win to your name. The 3 of y'all, everyone for y'all's racing team, did a really good run here tonight. Y'all had your fuel strategy down point. No one ran out of gas this time, which is always great to see, and y'all put together a really solid race here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought when Sukup pitted early that first round, I'm like, oh, he might have something if it goes green. And then I knew I couldn't. I still had plenty of laps left, but I couldn't. I had to pit somewhere close to him because I knew it'd come out at the end. But team 1, 2, 3. Hale Trailers, Josh Doobie, and Main Mobile, John Emerson. Just we all just get on here and have fun and chat. And again, I got to thank my mom and dad for watching. They tune in every week to watch Josh and I. Josh is like a brother to me. So, but yeah, I got to thank my wife. Just thank everyone. I mean, this league, Steve and Matt do an excellent job. They're straight up guys. And they don't take no crap, and they give what you deserve, or they give you know, what you deserve actually, and they call it like it is, and it's fair game. So I'd like to thank you for broadcasting once again, and just gonna go celebrate and concentrate next week.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, Kenny. And as always, I look forward to seeing you next week. And most importantly, good luck. You've got your work cut out for you, and it is going to be one heck of a race next week.
Yeah, I'll either be in the car in the pits, or I'll have nothing but a steering wheel.
That sounds like a plan. You have a good rest of your evening, Kenny.
Thank you.
And finishing back in P number 2, that is the 9 of Mr. Joshua Doob. Unfortunately, one position shy of getting a win to your name and one position shy from taking home the starting position bonus, but you still brought it home in second place. That is a really solid finish. How are you feeling now that everything is said and done here for round 11 of the season?
Oh, hey, can't complain about second, but that's the story of my season here so far in this one. I can't get a win in here to save my life. That first caution, this is a really tricky pet road coming off. When you come off, you come around a racetrack, nowhere to go. When I came out that first way, Kenny and Johnny were coming right on there, so I couldn't just get right on the track instantly and get into it. Had to let them go, and that's where I lost the 2.5 seconds right there to Kenny. And I mean, we're basically all running the same speed. We were all bumper to bumper pretty much until that first pit stop. So I just couldn't gain on it back after that.
Yeah, pit stop seems to be one of the big places that kills drivers here in this series, but either way, you managed to bring it home P number 2, and more importantly, you know what you can do different potentially heading into next week to maybe bring home your first win of the season. You reckon there's going to be any team orders you got to deal with from Trip being pretty much one or two positions outside of the championship right now?
No, I'd be honest with you. I think there's just enough of a gap that we'll all finish right where we are right now, the top five, to be honest with you.
Well, either way, I look forward to seeing what all of y'all bring out to the Five Flag Speedway next week. 250 laps might as well be a little bit of an enduro. How are you feeling heading into that?
Wow, my mouth just dropped when you said 250 at Five Flags. Wasn't expecting that. That's going to be a good long race.
Yep, the longest race of the season, and I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge for everyone. It might just not come down to who's the fastest driver, but who's able to persevere for that long.
We'll say though, I don't think that track will be too bad on the tires. North Wilkesboro, this track's horrible on tires, and we were going pretty good. I mean, we only pit because of fuel. I was only, 2 or 3 tenths off times in the long run, so it wasn't terrible. But like at the end of that one day, once Sukup had pitted, we had to all start coming in with 4 or 5 laps. So we still had like almost 30 laps of fuel left when he pit last, but we had to come in at that time because he would have gained way too much on new tires.
Yeah, the strategy seemed to work out for you, and it got you home on the podium. And of course, speaking of the podium, before I let you head off and celebrate for the evening and start getting yourself prepped for our 250 lap event next week, there anyone on the side of that number 9 machine you'd like to thank for getting you on up here?
I'll thank the whole teammate, Kenny, me, and Johnny. Pretty cool, get us all in top three. As always, Hail Trailer, Main Mobile, Gage, Paul the Builder, Sundown Construction. It's all real sponsors, as always. Cooley's Commercial Tire. They all help out with costs, the iRacing and whatnot. So glad to have them on board.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, Joshua, and I look forward to seeing y'all next week.
Yeah, man, you too. Thanks as always for the broadcast. It's great. Go watch that in a minute here. And thanks to Matt and Steve for putting it on.
Yes, sir. You have a good rest of your evening. And rounding out the podium here tonight, competing for that very same racing team, Jonathan Emerson, you got it home on the podium. 150 laps at North Wilkesboro. Not exactly the most forgiving track, but you got it done. How are you feeling now that everything's said and done here tonight?
Stay with Kenny and give myself a shot to win. But overall, at least I'm in the top 3.
Yeah, definitely a very solid run. Actually, it looks like you're one of the only drivers to finish where you qualified. So, all things considered, maybe not the race you wanted, but still a very solid finish in that number 23 and heading into 5 flags next week for 250 laps. How do you feel about heading into the championship event next week?
250 laps is quite a lot of laps, but I feel pretty good. I won one of the money races there that we ran, but overall, it's one of my better tracks. But still, 250 laps and all these people out here, just no mistakes.
Yeah, I really do think that it's going to be a theme of maybe not who has the fastest car next week, but whoever is just able to persevere that long of a race without making any mistakes. But either way, if there were a driver to be able to do it, it would probably be you. You put together a really solid run here tonight. Like you said, you have won a couple of races there in the past. So all things considered, I think things are looking pretty good for that number 23 machine heading into next week.
Yeah, hopefully you're right.
Of course, before I let you go and celebrate getting here up on the podium tonight, there on the side of that number 23 you'd like to thank for getting you up here?
Josh Doobie, basically, he's the one that put the whole paint scheme together and everything, and he's the one that kind of got me started racing here. So, Josh, Kenny, and TJ, and all those guys helped me out.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, thank you.
And before we sign things quite off here tonight, I do want to announce that finishing position number 5 is going to be taking home the random draw tonight for the $5 bonus. Finishing position number 5 is the number 85 of Brandon Kiger, the driver who started in last place and climbed his way all the way into the top 5. So a little bit of luck rolls his way, and I'd imagine he is a pretty deserving driver for that reward. Now, also, before we pull up the race results, I will go really quickly over the unofficial point standings right now. Again, I want to reiterate, these are not official points. These are just what the estimate should be going off of everyone's finishing positions right now. Gerard Lawrence still in the lead of the championship with 1,320 points. Then Kenny Tripp just behind, 1,309. So only 11 points dividing the top 2 drivers. And then a little bit further back, Brandon Kiger in position number 3 with 1,278. So that is roughly, I believe, 31 points dividing these 2 drivers. So the gap has gotten a little bit bigger for second and third, because coming into tonight's event, it was about 15. So the gap between second and third has effectively doubled. And then Joshua Doob in fourth with 1,258 points. So 20 points behind Kiger, which is almost exactly what the points was coming into tonight's race. So no real change there. And then Sukup in fifth has 1,246. That is 12 points separating Doobie and Sukup, which is, again, almost exactly what it was coming into tonight's race. So the battle for the championship has only grown closer here tonight. And next week, heading into the 5 Flags Speedway for 250 laps is going to be quite the championship event. That said, before we sign it off here for the evening, let's take a quick look down at our race results as they stand right now. Again, unofficial, still the potential for penalties to be issued down from the higher ups. I don't expect that to happen, but you never know what might just happen. But as of right now, Kenny Tripp takes home his third checkered flag of the season in that number 12, with Joshua Doobie in the 9, finishing back in P number 2. Third place going to go back to the 23 of Jonathan Emerson, with Mike Sukup and Brandon Kiger rounding out the top 5. Kiger, of course, being the driver who won the lucky finishing position role, he managed to take home a nice little $5 bonus by finishing in 5th place. 6th going to go back to the 27 of Gerard Lawrence, with Will Salamone in the 72 back in P number 7. 8th going to go to John Friley in the 126, and Jason Branch in the 28 is going to bring it home 9th, with TJ Moon rounding out the top 10. 11th going to go back to Tyler McRae in the 99, with Brent Mex in the 66 bringing it home P number 12. 13th going to go back to the 40 of Sean Patrick, followed by Tommy Mitchell in 14th, and Art Hendren rounding out the 15-car field here tonight, as Wesley Whitfield did not start the event. So that's how we look heading into our championship event next week. 250 laps at the Five Flag Speedway, the longest race so far this season, and it's bound to be quite an exciting run. Next week, we crown a champion that brings home roughly $85 of real-world money and an actual physical real-life trophy to celebrate their championship. Whole lot is on the line for these drivers. Everyone in the top 5 still in contention pretty much. It's bound to be quite the event. So be sure to tune in, same day, same time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And as always, gotta thank all of y'all for coming out to the event here tonight, and I hope to see you all next week. Have a good evening, race fans.